The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store, and Eleanor Jenkins gripped the worn carpetbag in her lap, so tightly her knuckles turned white beneath the layer of trail dust coating her skin. 3 weeks of bone-jarring travel from Philadelphia had brought her to Pendleton, Oregon, a frontier town that looked nothing like the watercolor sketches in the magazines back east. The year was 1878, and she had arrived to marry a man whose face she had seen only in a single faded photograph. A man who had promised her a home and security in exchange for her companionship and domestic skills. What she had not told him in her carefully worded letters was that she would have agreed to almost anything to escape the suffocating brutality of her late father's house, inherited by her eldest brother after the old man's death 6 months prior. Eleanor climbed down from the coach without waiting for assistance, her travel-stained burgundy dress catching on a splinter. She barely noticed. The driver tossed her trunk down with a thud that made her flinch. An involuntary reaction she immediately tried to hide by smoothing her dark blonde hair back from her face. The street was wide and dusty, lined with false-fronted buildings that seemed to lean into the wind sweeping down from the Blue Mountains. Horses stood tied to hitching posts, their tails swishing at flies, and somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil in steady rhythm. "Miss Jenkins?" A man approached from the direction of the saloon, his gait unsteady, his clothes rumpled and stained. He was perhaps 40, with a florid face and small eyes that assessed her with an expression she recognized all too well. It was the look of a man calculating what he owned, what he could control. "Mr. Crawley?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "That's right." He moved closer, and she caught the sharp scent of whiskey. "You're prettier than I expected. Figured a woman your age still unwed would be plain as a fence post." Eleanor was 24, which made her a spinster by most accounts, though her brother had made sure no decent man would court her by spreading rumors about her temperament and spreading darker truths about the violent household she had grown up in, suggesting she was damaged goods. She said nothing to Crawley's comment, had learned long ago that responding to such remarks only made things worse. Crawley reached for her arm, his fingers closing around her wrist with a grip that was immediately too tight. She stiffened but did not pull away. "Got the preacher waiting at my place. We'll get this done quick, and then you can start earning your keep. House is a mess, and I have not had a decent meal in months." He began pulling her down the boardwalk, and Eleanor stumbled, her travel-weary legs struggling to keep pace. Her wrist throbbed where his fingers dug in, and a familiar cold dread settled in her stomach. She had traveled 2,000 miles only to find another version of the same prison. But what choice did she have? She had spent her last dollars on the coach fare, had no family who would take her in, no skills beyond cooking and cleaning, and making herself as invisible as possible when men's tempers flared. "Hold on there, Crawley." The voice was low and calm, but it carried an authority that made Crawley stop. Eleanor looked up to see a man stepping down from the general store's porch. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the wind-weathered face of someone who spent his days under the open sky. He wore dusty range clothes, a dark hat pushed back on his head, revealing brown hair that curled slightly at the ends, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, and there was something in the easy way he moved that suggested competence and quiet strength. "This is not your business, Ryder," Crawley said, his grip tightening on Eleanor's wrist until she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. "You are about to break that lady's wrist," Ryder Xander said, his tone still conversational. "I would call that my business, seeing as I do not much like watching men hurt women in the middle of the street. She is my intended. We have an agreement. Then I reckon she can walk beside you of her own accord, cannot she?" Ryder's hand rested casually on his hip, near the worn handle of his revolver, though he made no threatening move. Eleanor noticed several other people on the street had stopped to watch, including a woman in a neat blue dress standing outside the dressmaker's shop. Crawley's jaw worked, and for a moment, Eleanor thought he would refuse. Then he released her wrist with a muttered curse, and she immediately cradled her arm against her chest. "Keep your nose out of what does not concern you, Xander. You are not so popular in this town that you can afford to make enemies." "I seem to manage all right." Ryder's gaze shifted to Eleanor, and she found herself looking into eyes that held something she had rarely seen directed at her, genuine concern. "Miss, are you quite well? That was a long journey from back east." She wanted to say yes, wanted to smooth this over and avoid making the situation worse, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she found herself staring at this stranger who had intervened when no one else had, this cowboy who spoke to her as if she were a person worthy of consideration rather than a piece of property to be claimed. "Answer him," Crawley snapped. "I am well enough," Eleanor managed, though her voice shook. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Xander." Ryder studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he saw far more than she wanted anyone to see. The fear, the exhaustion, the desperation that had brought her here. "The preacher is Thomas Whitfield, is he not? Good man. Known him for years." He tipped his hat to her. "Welcome to Pendleton, Miss Jenkins. I hope you find what you are looking for here." Then he stepped back, allowing Crawley to guide her away, though this time the man kept his hands to himself. Eleanor glanced back once and found Ryder still watching, his expression thoughtful and troubled. Then Crawley jerked his head, and she hurried to keep pace, her carpetbag banging against her leg. Crawley's house was a quarter-mile outside of town, a sagging structure that had once been painted white, but now showed more bare wood than color. The yard was littered with broken tools and empty bottles, and chickens scattered as they approached. Inside was worse, dirty dishes piled on every surface, clothes strewn across the floor, and a smell that suggested nothing had been properly cleaned in a very long time. "You will fix all this," Crawley said, gesturing broadly. "I expect hot meals twice a day, laundry done regular, and the place kept proper. In exchange, you get a roof and your keep." That was the arrangement. Eleanor set down her carpetbag, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. "You said the preacher would be here." "Change my mind. We can do that tomorrow or the next day. No hurry, seeing as you have nowhere else to go." Crawley moved closer, backing her against the rough wall. "Might as well make sure we are suited to each other first." Fear spiked through her, sharp and familiar. "Mr. Crawley, I would prefer to wait until after we are properly married." "Would you now?" His hand came up to grip her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Seems to me you do not have much say in the matter. You are here, in my house, and we both know you have got no other prospects. So you can make this easy, or you can make it hard. Either way, I am getting what I paid for." Eleanor's mind raced. She knew this situation, had lived variations of it her entire life. Her father's heavy hand, her brother's cruel words and crueler actions. She had thought marriage to a stranger might be different, might offer escape, but she had been a fool. There was no escape, not for women like her. There was only endurance. But something had shifted in the past hour. Seeing the cowboy Ryder Xander intervene on behalf of a complete stranger, hearing him speak as though her comfort mattered, had cracked something open inside her. A small voice that she had spent years silencing whispered that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to accept this. "Let me go," she said quietly. "I do not think so." Crawley's hand moved from her chin to her throat, not quite squeezing, but making the threat clear. "You are going to learn your place real quick, Eleanor. I am not a patient man." The door crashed open. Crawley spun around, still pinning Eleanor to the wall. Ryder Xander stood in the doorway, and the casual ease was gone from his bearing. He looked every inch the frontier cowboy now, dangerous and focused. "Step away from her, Crawley." "Get out of my house!" "Cannot do that!" Ryder's hand hovered near his gun. "Miss Jenkins is coming with me." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. This was madness. She had an agreement with Crawley, however terrible. She could not simply leave, could not impose on a stranger's kindness. "Mr. Xander, I appreciate your concern, but that man is not going to marry you," Ryder said, his eyes never leaving Crawley. "He has had 3 mail-order brides in the past 2 years. First one ran off after a week, second one disappeared, and folks say she is buried somewhere up in the hills, though nobody could ever prove it. Third one made it to the county seat and told the sheriff Crawley beat her near to death. So no, miss, I am not leaving you here." The fear in Eleanor's chest transformed into ice-cold terror. She looked at Crawley and saw the truth in his reddening face, the fury in his eyes. "Lies," Crawley spat. "All lies from women too lazy to do honest work." "Then you will not mind if Miss Jenkins stays at the boarding house tonight while she considers her options," Ryder said. "If everything is as you say, she will come back tomorrow of her own free will." Crawley's hand tightened on Eleanor's throat, and she gasped. In the next instant, Ryder had crossed the room, yanking the older man away with a force that sent Crawley stumbling backward. Eleanor pressed her hand to her throat, coughing. "You have got 5 seconds to get your bag and come with me," Ryder said to her, positioning himself between her and Crawley. "After that, I cannot promise things will not get uglier than they already are." Eleanor did not need to be told twice. She grabbed her carpetbag, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Ryder backed toward the door, keeping himself as a shield, and she followed, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "You are a dead man, Xander," Crawley roared, "and that woman is mine by contract." "Take it up with the sheriff," Ryder called back, then caught Eleanor's elbow gently, so gently she almost wept, and hurried her out into the fading afternoon light. They did not speak until they were halfway back to town. Eleanor's legs felt unsteady, and her mind could not seem to catch up with what had just happened. She had been in Pendleton for less than 2 hours, and her entire plan had collapsed. She had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects. She was entirely at the mercy of this stranger's goodwill. "I am sorry," she finally whispered. "I have placed you in a terrible position." Mr. Crawley seemed very angry. "Crawley has been angry since the day he was born," Ryder said. "It is not your fault, and you have got nothing to apologize for. I just wish I had known he had sent for another bride. I would have tried to warn you before you ever arrived." "You mentioned a boarding house." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I do not have money for lodging. I spent everything getting here." Ryder was quiet for a moment as they walked, the only sounds the crunch of their footsteps and the distant lowing of cattle. "Miss Eleanor, may I call you Eleanor?" "Yes." "I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town, the Double Cross Spread. It is not fancy, but it is clean and comfortable. My sister lived there until she got married last spring, and her room is sitting empty. You are welcome to stay there while you figure out what comes next. No strings, no expectations, just a safe place to catch your breath." Eleanor stopped walking and stared at him. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me." Ryder turned to face her, and in the slanting golden light of late afternoon, she could see the weathered lines around his eyes, the serious set of his mouth. "My mother died when I was 12. Pneumonia took her quick. Before that, though, my father used to hit her. I was too young to do anything about it, too small to stop him. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help a woman in a bad situation, I would take it. So, that is what I'm doing. Nothing more complicated than that." Tears burned in Eleanor's eyes. She had not cried in years, had learned that tears only made men angrier, but she found herself blinking them back now. "I cannot repay you. I am not asking you to." He resumed walking, and after a moment she followed. "Though, if you are inclined to help out with cooking, I will not say no. My biscuits are about as appetizing as old leather, and I have been surviving mostly on beans and salt pork." Despite everything, Eleanor felt the faintest hint of a smile tug at her lips. "I can cook. That was one of the few things my father found acceptable about me. Then we will get along just fine." They reached the general store just as the proprietor was preparing to close. Ryder arranged for Eleanor's trunk to be loaded onto a wagon, then led her to the livery where a sturdy bay mare waited. He helped Eleanor into the wagon seat with the same careful gentleness he had shown since intervening with Crawley, never gripping too hard, never assuming liberties. She found herself watching his hands, fascinated by the calluses and scars that spoke of hard work, the controlled strength that he wielded with such restraint. The ride to the Double Cross Ranch took nearly an hour as the sun sank toward the western mountains. The landscape was beautiful in a stark way, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, the blue mountains rising purple in the distance, the wide Umatilla River glinting like hammered silver. Eleanor had never seen so much open space, had never experienced the profound silence of the high desert at dusk. It was both intimidating and strangely liberating. "That is the main house," Ryder said, pointing to a sturdy log structure nestled in a fold of the hills. Cottonwood trees grew along a creek behind it, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. Outbuildings flanked the house, a barn, a stable, a bunkhouse, and various sheds. Horses grazed in a nearby pasture, and Eleanor could see cattle scattered across the hills beyond. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It is home." Ryder guided the wagon up to the house and set the brake. "Come on, I will show you around before it gets full dark." The interior of the house was a revelation. It was tidy and well-built, with a large main room dominated by a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a good iron stove, and 2 bedrooms opening off a short hallway. The furniture was simple, but well-made, and everything was clean, if a bit dusty from lack of use. "That was my sister's room," Ryder said, opening one of the bedroom doors. The room contained a bed with an iron frame, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "Sheets are in the chest there. I will fetch your trunk." He left her alone, and Eleanor sank down on the bed, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The events of the day crashed over her. The arrival, Crawley's immediate violence, Ryder's intervention, the revelation about Crawley's previous brides. She should be terrified, should be planning her next move, but all she felt was a strange numbness. Ryder returned with her trunk, setting it gently on the floor. "There is a pump out back for fresh water, and I will heat some for washing. You must be exhausted. I will fix something simple for supper. Do not expect much, and then you can rest." "Let me cook," Eleanor said, standing. "Please, I need to do something useful, and you have already done so much." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If you are sure, there is venison from a deer I shot 2 days ago, potatoes in the cellar, and canned vegetables from last year's garden. Take whatever you need." They worked together in the kitchen, Ryder building up the fire in the stove, while Eleanor explored the larder and assembled ingredients. It felt strange to be in a kitchen with a man who did not criticize her every move, who instead asked if she needed anything and thanked her when she handed him a pot to fill with water. She made a simple stew with the venison and vegetables, biscuits from the supplies she found, and strong coffee. Her hands moved through familiar tasks while her mind slowly began to process what had happened. "You know he will not let this go," she said quietly as they sat down to eat at the rough wooden table. "Mr. Crawley, I mean. He will say I broke our agreement. He might claim I owe him money. Let him try." Ryder bit into a biscuit and made an appreciative sound. "These are the best biscuits I have had in months. And as for Crawley, he does not have any legal claim on you. Those mail-order bride arrangements are not worth the paper they are written on, if both parties are not willing. You are free to change your mind." "Am I?" Eleanor looked down at her plate. "I do not feel free. I feel trapped, just in a different way. I have nowhere to go, no means of supporting myself. I ran from one bad situation straight into another, and the only reason I am not in Crawley's house right now is because you intervened. What happens when your charity runs out? When you realize you have taken in a stranger who has nothing to offer?" "Hey," Ryder waited until she looked up at him. "First of all, this is not charity. You are already pulling your weight by cooking a meal my stomach will not rebel against. Second, you are not trapped here. You can leave anytime you want, and I will give you enough money for passage to wherever you want to go. Third, you have been in Pendleton for all of 3 hours. Give yourself time to breathe before you decide your future is hopeless." Eleanor blinked hard against the tears threatening again. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because kindness costs me nothing," he said simply. "And because you deserve it. Everyone deserves basic human decency, Eleanor. The fact that you seem surprised by it tells me you have not had much of it in your life." She could not argue with that. Instead, she focused on her stew, on the warmth of the food and the solid roof overhead, and the quiet presence of the man across from her. Ryder Xander was unlike any man she had ever known, and she did not quite know what to make of him. After dinner, Ryder insisted on cleaning up while Eleanor made up her bed with the linens from the chest. Her entire body ached with exhaustion, but it was a clean kind of tired rather than the grinding weariness of fear and hypervigilance. She changed into her nightgown, braided her hair, and slipped between the sheets. The bed was comfortable, the room was quiet, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. She did not expect to sleep, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into darkness. Eleanor woke to morning light streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Philadelphia, then remembered everything with a jolt. She dressed quickly in a simple gray work dress, re-pinned her hair, and ventured out into the main room. Ryder stood at the stove, attempting to cook something in a skillet. From the smell, it was not going well. He looked up when she entered and had the grace to appear sheepish. "I told you my cooking skills were lacking." "Let me." Eleanor crossed to the stove and peered into the skillet where eggs were rapidly burning. She rescued what she could, then started fresh, making proper scrambled eggs along with toast and more coffee. They ate together in companionable silence, and Eleanor found herself relaxing incrementally. "I need to ride out and check on the cattle today," Ryder said as they finished breakfast. "One of my ranch hands, Charlie, mentioned some might have drifted up toward the north pasture. You are welcome to come along if you want to see the property, or you can stay here and rest, whatever you prefer." The thought of staying alone in the house, safe as it seemed, sent a flicker of anxiety through Eleanor. "I would like to come, if I will not be in the way." "You will not be?" Ryder smiled, and Eleanor noticed for the first time that he had a slight dimple in his left cheek. "Can you ride?" "I used to, when I was younger, before my father decided it was unladylike." "Then we will get you reacquainted with it." An hour later, Eleanor sat astride a gentle gray mare named Dove, wearing a split skirt she had borrowed from the clothes Ryder's sister had left behind. The world looked different from horseback, wider and more open. Ryder rode beside her on a rangy chestnut gelding, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. "My father started this spread back in '62, right after the Civil War. He ran it until he died 5 years ago, then it passed to me. We run about 200 head of cattle, sell them to buyers who drive them north to the railroad. It is hard work but honest. The land provides if you know how to listen to it." Eleanor watched the way he sat his horse, easy and confident, his gaze constantly scanning the horizon. "You said your sister got married?" "Last spring. Fellow named James Holbrook, owns the feed store in town. Good man, treats her well. They are expecting their first child come fall." There was warmth in Ryder's voice when he spoke of his sister, genuine affection. Eleanor felt a pang of envy. She had never had that kind of relationship with her own siblings. They rode for several hours, checking water sources, counting cattle, and mending a section of fence that had come loose. Ryder taught Eleanor how to twist wire properly, his hands guiding hers without ever making her feel inadequate or stupid. It was a revelation, this patient instruction. Her father had always berated her when she failed to master a task immediately. Ryder simply showed her again, offering encouragement. By midday, Eleanor's muscles ached from the unaccustomed riding, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from useful work. They stopped by the creek to water the horses and eat the simple lunch Eleanor had packed: bread, cheese, and apples. "You are a natural," Ryder said, watching as Eleanor successfully coaxed Dove to drink. "The mare likes you." "She is sweet." Eleanor stroked the horse's neck, enjoying the warm solidity of the animal. "I had forgotten how much I liked riding. My father said I smiled too much when I rode, that it was unseemly." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Your father sounds like he was a hard man." "That is a kind way of putting it." Eleanor sat down on a smooth rock near the water, watching the current ripple over stones. He believed women existed to serve men, to be silent and obedient and grateful for whatever scraps of attention or affection they received. "When my mother died, I was 10. After that, I became responsible for keeping house for him and my 3 brothers. They were all cut from the same cloth." "Is that why you answered Crawley's advertisement?" "My father died 6 months ago. The house passed to my oldest brother, Marcus. He is worse than my father ever was." Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I knew if I stayed, something terrible would happen. So I saved every penny I could hide, and when I saw Crawley's advertisement seeking a wife, I answered. I thought anything would be better than staying." Ryder was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. "I am sorry you had to live like that. No one should grow up afraid in their own home." "Were you afraid? You said your father hit your mother." "Terrified," Ryder admitted. "Every night I would lie in bed listening for his footsteps, hoping he would not go to their room, knowing there was nothing I could do if he did. When she died, I felt guilty for being relieved. At least she was free of him. Then he got killed 3 years later when his horse threw him, and I felt guilty for being glad about that too." Eleanor understood that guilt, the complicated tangle of emotions that came from surviving cruelty. "You turned out different from him." "I try to be. Every day I try to be the kind of man my mother would have been proud of, the kind of man who uses his strength to protect rather than hurt." He picked up a stone and tossed it into the creek. "That is why I could not leave you with Crawley. I saw the fear in your eyes, and I remembered my mother's eyes looking the same way." Something in Eleanor's chest loosened at his words. She had spent so long believing that all men were like her father and brothers, that violence and control were simply the masculine way. But Ryder was different. He carried that same potential for violence. She had seen it flash in his eyes when he confronted Crawley, but he wielded it with conscious restraint, pointing it only at those who deserved it. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, for caring enough to intervene." "You do not need to thank me for basic human decency, Eleanor." But she did, because it was not basic to her. It was extraordinary, miraculous even. And as they sat by the creek in the warm afternoon sun, Eleanor allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, her life did not have to be defined by fear and survival. Maybe there was room for something else. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor settled into a routine at the Double Cross Ranch. She cooked and cleaned, tended the vegetable garden behind the house, and gradually took over the domestic tasks that Ryder had been managing poorly on his own. In exchange, he taught her to ride properly, to recognize the signs of changing weather in the high desert, to understand the rhythms of ranch life. They worked companionably during the days and talked long into the evenings, sharing stories about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Eleanor learned that Ryder was 28 years old, that he had nearly married once, but his fiancée had decided ranch life was too hard and married a banker from Portland instead. He read extensively from a small collection of books, mostly histories and adventure novels, and he had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter more than once. He was patient with animals and people alike, quick to praise and slow to anger. In turn, she told him about her childhood, the rare bright moments amid the darkness, about her mother, who had taught her to read in secret because her father thought education wasted on girls, about a neighbor woman who had once let Eleanor hide in her kitchen for an afternoon when things at home got too bad, about the small acts of rebellion she had committed, the tiny ways she had preserved some sense of self despite everything. "You are stronger than you think," Ryder said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "Survival takes strength. Getting out takes even more. I do not feel strong. I feel like I am made of cracked glass, and one wrong move will shatter me completely. Glass can be mended. It might not look the same as it did before, but it can still be beautiful, still be useful." He glanced at her, his expression earnest in the lamplight spilling from the house. "You are not broken, Eleanor. You are healing." She wanted to believe him. Some days she almost did. On the 15th day after her arrival, Ryder had to go into Pendleton for supplies. Eleanor volunteered to come with him, partly because she needed fabric to repair some clothes, partly because she was curious to see how the town would react to her presence. She knew by now that gossip traveled fast in small communities, and surely everyone had heard about the confrontation with Crawley. They took the wagon in the early morning, the air crisp and clear. As they approached town, Eleanor found herself growing tense, her hands clenching in her lap. "Hey," Ryder said gently, "you do not have to do this if you are not ready. I cannot hide at the ranch forever. I need to face this." "You are not hiding. You are recovering. There is a difference." But he did not push, simply drove the wagon down Pendleton's main street and parked in front of the general store. The reaction was immediate. People stared, whispered behind their hands, and Eleanor felt the weight of their judgment. She kept her chin up and followed Ryder into the store, determined not to show how much their scrutiny affected her. The proprietor, a heavy-set man named George Murphy, greeted Ryder warmly, then looked at Eleanor with barely concealed curiosity. "Miss Jenkins, heard you decided against marrying Crawley." "That is correct." "Shame. Man needs a wife to settle him down." "Or perhaps some men should not have wives at all," Ryder said mildly, his hand resting on the small of Eleanor's back in a gesture of support. "We need flour, sugar, and coffee. Also some fabric if you have got any new stock." While they waited for Murphy to gather the supplies, a woman approached. She was perhaps 35, with graying brown hair and intelligent eyes. "Miss Jenkins, I am Martha Holbrook. I own the dressmaker's shop across the street." Eleanor remembered seeing this woman on her first day, watching the confrontation with Crawley. "How do you do, Mrs. Holbrook? I wanted to tell you that I think you made the right choice, turning down Crawley. That man is poison, and no woman should be subjected to him." Martha kept her voice low but firm. "I also wanted to offer you work if you need it. I could use help with sewing, especially now with wedding season coming up. It does not pay a fortune, but it is honest work." Eleanor blinked, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "That is very generous of you." "It is practical. I need the help, and you strike me as someone who knows her way around a needle. Come by the shop tomorrow if you are interested, and we will discuss terms." Martha smiled, then nodded to Ryder. "Your sister told me you were a good man. Ryder Xander. I see she was right." After Martha left, Eleanor felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Maybe not everyone in Pendleton saw her as a curiosity or a cautionary tale. Maybe there was room here for her to build an actual life. They finished their shopping without incident, though Eleanor noticed Crawley watching from across the street, his expression dark. Ryder noticed too, positioning himself between Eleanor and the other man until they were safely back in the wagon. "He's going to cause trouble," Eleanor said as they left town. "Probably, but we will handle it when it comes." Ryder glanced at her. "What do you think about Martha's offer?" "I think I should accept it. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever, and having my own income would give me options." "You are not imposing," Ryder said, a bit more sharply than usual. "But if working makes you feel more secure, then you should do it. Just know that you do not have to earn the right to stay at the ranch. You are welcome there regardless." Eleanor studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows. Over the past 2 weeks, she had grown accustomed to his presence, had begun to feel safe in a way she never had before. More than that, she had begun to notice other things. The way her heart beat a little faster when he smiled at her, the warmth that flooded through her when his hand brushed hers accidentally, the way she found excuses to linger near him. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She was falling in love with Ryder Xander, and she had no idea what to do about it. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor sat on the porch in her nightgown and wrapper, watching the moon rise over the mountains. The door opened quietly behind her, and Ryder emerged, wearing trousers and an unbuttoned shirt. "Could not sleep either?" He settled onto the steps beside her, careful to leave a respectable distance between them. "Too much thinking." "About?" Eleanor hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. "About how strange it is to feel safe, about how I keep waiting for something terrible to happen, because nothing good has ever lasted in my life. About how I do not know how to accept kindness without expecting a price." Ryder was quiet for a long moment. What if there is no price? What if kindness is just kindness? Then I would not know how to live in a world like that. "You could learn." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and serious. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it without feeling obligated or pressured in any way. Can you do that?" Her heart began to pound. "Yes. These past 2 weeks have been the best I have had in a long time. Not just because you cook better than I do, or because the house is cleaner, but because you are here. I like talking to you. I like your quiet strength and your sharp mind, and the way you are learning to smile again. I like coming in from the range and knowing you will be there, and I think if I am not careful, I am going to fall in love with you." He held up a hand before she could respond. "But I also know you came here running from one bad situation and narrowly escaped another. I know you need time and space to figure out who you are without someone trying to control you. So I am telling you this only so you know where I stand, not because I expect anything from you. You can stay at the ranch as long as you want, work for Martha, save money, and leave if that is what you need to do. I will not stand in your way or make you feel trapped, but if you ever want something more, if you ever think you might feel the same way I do, I will be here, and I promise you, Eleanor, I will spend every day showing you what gentle means." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and this time she let them fall. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such raw honesty and respect. No one had ever offered her a choice without strings attached. "I am already falling in love with you," she whispered. "I have been for days, and it terrifies me, because every time I have loved someone, they have hurt me. Every time I have trusted someone, they have betrayed that trust. And you are so good, Ryder, so fundamentally decent, and I am afraid I do not know how to be with someone like you. I am afraid I am too damaged, too broken." "You are not broken," Ryder said fiercely. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm and calloused, his touch so careful it made her chest ache. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, and I will spend as long as it takes proving to you that love does not have to hurt, that you deserve gentleness and patience and respect, if you will let me." Eleanor leaned into his touch, turning her face to press a kiss to his palm. I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be in a relationship that is not built on fear. Then we will figure it out together. One day at a time, one moment at a time. No rushing, no pressure, just us, learning how to be together. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, wiping away a tear. Can you trust me enough to try? She looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity, only the steady warmth that had drawn her to him from the beginning. She thought about the past 2 weeks, about all the small kindnesses he had shown her, all the times he had been patient when she flinched or pulled away, all the ways he had given her space to heal. Yes, she said, I can try. Ryder smiled, that slight dimple appearing in his cheek, and Eleanor felt something shift inside her. The cracked glass Ryder had spoken of began to mend, not erasing the fractures but incorporating them into a new pattern, stronger for having been broken and remade. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and brief, but it sent warmth cascading through Eleanor's entire body. This was what gentle meant, this careful respect for her boundaries, this recognition of her autonomy, this tenderness without expectation of return. Come on, Ryder said softly, standing and offering his hand. You should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow if you're going to talk to Martha about that job. Eleanor took his hand and let him help her up. He walked her to her bedroom door, squeezed her hand gently, then retreated to his own room. Eleanor lay in bed for a long time afterward, pressing her hand to her forehead, where he had kissed her, marveling at how such a small gesture could mean so much. The next morning, Ryder drove Eleanor into town for her meeting with Martha Holbrook. The dressmaker's shop was neat and well organized, with bolts of fabric lining the walls and a large cutting table dominating the center of the room. Martha greeted Eleanor warmly and showed her around, explaining the various projects she had in progress. I mostly do mending and alterations, Martha said, but I also make wedding dresses, Sunday clothes, and riding outfits for the ranch wives. The work is steady if not exciting. I can pay you 50 cents a day to start, more if you prove skilled. Hours are 8 to 5, 6 days a week, Sundays off. Does that suit you? It suits me very well, Eleanor said. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow, if you are able. They shook hands on it, and Eleanor felt a surge of pride. This was her job, earned on her own merits, providing her own income. It was a step toward independence, toward building a life that belonged to her alone. As she left the shop, she nearly collided with a young woman hurrying down the boardwalk. Oh, I am so sorry, the woman exclaimed, then stopped. You are Eleanor Jenkins, are you not? I am Ryder Xander. Well, Sarah Holbrook now, Ryder's sister. Eleanor took in the woman's bright smile and obvious pregnancy. It is nice to meet you, Mrs. Holbrook. Please, call me Sarah, and I have been wanting to meet you ever since Ryder told me he had taken in a guest. He has been happier these past 2 weeks than I have seen him in years. I think you were good for him. Eleanor felt herself blushing. He has been very kind to me. Ryder is good at being kind, Sarah said warmly. But he is not usually so quick to open his home to strangers. You must be special. She linked her arm through Eleanor's. Come have tea with me? I would love to get to know you better, and I can tell you embarrassing stories about my brother from when we were children. Despite her natural reserve, Eleanor found herself charmed by Sarah's open friendliness. They spent an hour at the small restaurant on Main Street, drinking tea and talking. Sarah was easy to talk to, never prying but genuinely interested, and she had a gift for putting Eleanor at ease. Ryder told me a bit about what happened with Crawley, Sarah said carefully. I am glad my brother was there to help. He takes after our mother, always wanting to protect people who cannot protect themselves. He has been wonderful. I do not know what I would have done without his intervention. He cares about you, Sarah said gently. I can tell from the way he talks about you, and I think you care about him too? Eleanor nodded, unable to find words for the complicated tangle of emotions in her chest. Good. He deserves someone who appreciates him. His last fiancée did not, and it hurt him more than he lets on. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze Eleanor's hand. Be patient with each other. Building trust takes time, especially when you have both been hurt. But I think you two could be very happy together if you give it a chance. When Ryder collected Eleanor later that afternoon, Sarah hugged them both and extracted a promise that they would come to dinner the following Sunday. As they drove back to the ranch, Eleanor felt lighter than she had in weeks. "Your sister is wonderful," she told Ryder. "She is, a bit meddlesome sometimes, but her heart is in the right place." He glanced at her. "Did she interrogate you about us?" "A little, but kindly." Eleanor paused. "She said you were hurt when your engagement ended." Ryder was silent for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "Emily did not want to be a rancher's wife. She wanted society and comfort and a life I could not give her. When she broke things off, I understood, but it still stung. I had thought we would build a life together, that love would be enough to overcome practical differences. I was wrong. I am sorry. Do not be. Looking back, I think we would have made each other miserable. We wanted different things, had different values. With you," he trailed off, then continued, "with you it feels different. Like we are building something together from the ground up, with no false expectations or illusions. Does that make sense?" "It does." Eleanor watched the landscape roll past, the familiar hills and sagebrush that were becoming home. "I have been thinking about what you said last night, about learning how to be together. I want that, Ryder. I want to try." He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The gesture was simple but profound, a connection freely given and freely accepted. Eleanor felt the warmth of his palm against hers and marveled at how something so small could feel so significant. "Then we will try together," Ryder said, "no matter how long it takes." Eleanor started work at the dressmaker's shop the next day. The work was demanding but satisfying, and Martha proved to be a patient teacher and a good friend. Eleanor's skill with a needle was evident, and she quickly became invaluable for the more detailed work. She took pride in her craftsmanship, in earning her own wages, in building relationships with the other women who came through the shop. At the ranch, her relationship with Ryder deepened slowly, carefully. They continued their evening talks on the porch, but now Ryder would take her hand or put his arm around her shoulders. He kissed her goodnight, soft brushes of his lips against her forehead or cheek, never demanding more than she was ready to give. He courted her with wildflowers picked on his rides, with books borrowed from his sister, with small, thoughtful gestures that showed he paid attention to her preferences and needs. Eleanor learned to accept his touch without flinching, to lean into his embraces instead of pulling away. She learned that anger did not have to follow affection, that kindness was not a precursor to cruelty. Ryder was endlessly patient, never pushing, always giving her control over the pace and depth of their physical intimacy. One evening, about 6 weeks after Eleanor's arrival, they sat together on the porch as usual. The summer heat had settled over the high desert, and the air smelled of sage and dust. Ryder had his arm around Eleanor, and she rested her head against his shoulder, comfortable in a way she had never imagined possible. "I have been thinking," Ryder said quietly, "and I want to ask you something, but I need you to know you can say no without any consequences. Whatever you decide, nothing changes between us unless you want it to." Eleanor lifted her head to look at him. "What is it?" "Marry me, Eleanor, not because you need security or protection, but because we love each other and want to build a life together. Marry me because when I think about my future, you are in every part of it. Marry me because you make me want to be the best version of myself, and because I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what gentle love looks like." He took both her hands in his. "But only if that is what you want too. Only if you feel ready. If you need more time, I will wait. If you would rather keep things as they are, we can do that. There is no pressure, no expectation. Just a question." Eleanor's heart felt too large for her chest. She looked at this man who had saved her, who had given her space to heal, who had shown her through action and word that love could be safe and gentle and good. She thought about the life they had begun building together, the partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. She thought about waking up beside him every morning, about raising children in a home filled with kindness instead of fear, about growing old together on this ranch that had become her sanctuary. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I want to marry you, Ryder. Not because I need to, but because I choose to. Because I love you and I trust you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." The smile that spread across Ryder's face was pure joy. He cupped her face in both hands, his touch as gentle as always, and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, and Eleanor felt it all the way down to her toes. His lips were soft but sure, moving against hers with careful passion. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and trust and hope into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day making sure you never regret this choice." "I know," Eleanor said, and she meant it. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Pendleton. Sarah and her husband James stood up with them, along with Martha and her husband George, who owned the feed store. Eleanor wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Ryder wore his best suit. The preacher, Thomas Whitfield, performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed Eleanor tenderly, while their small gathering of friends applauded. The reception was held at the ranch, with Sarah and Martha organizing food and decorations. It was nothing fancy, but it was filled with genuine warmth and happiness. Eleanor looked around at the people who had become her community, her friends, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Less than 3 months ago, she had arrived in Pendleton desperate and afraid. Now she had a home, a husband, and a future bright with possibility. That night, after the guests had left, Ryder carried Eleanor over the threshold of their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom. She had moved her things into his room the day before, and looked at her with such love it made her breath catch. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Eleanor admitted. She had told him about her limited understanding of marital relations, about her fear that she would not know what to do or would disappoint him. He had been reassuring, promising that they would learn together, that there was no right or wrong way as long as they communicated and cared for each other. "We do not have to do anything tonight," Ryder said. "We can just sleep if that is what you need." "No," Eleanor said, reaching up to unpin her hair. "I want this. I want you. I'm just not sure how to begin." Ryder smiled and moved closer, his hands coming up to help with her hair. "How about we start with this?" He gently removed the pins, letting her hair tumble down around her shoulders. "I have wanted to see your hair down since the day we met." He ran his fingers through it, his touch sending shivers across her scalp. Then he kissed her, slow and deep, and Eleanor felt the last of her fear dissolve. Ryder's hands moved to the buttons of her dress, unfastening them with careful precision, checking her face constantly to make sure she was comfortable. Eleanor helped him with his shirt, marveling at the solid warmth of him, the strength tempered with such gentleness. They came together slowly, carefully, with Ryder guiding Eleanor through the unfamiliar territory with patience and tenderness. He talked to her throughout, telling her what he was going to do before he did it, asking if she was all right, adjusting when she seemed uncomfortable. It was not perfect, there were awkward moments and minor discomforts, but it was filled with love and respect and a profound sense of connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Eleanor's head on Ryder's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Are you all right?" he asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I am better than all right," Eleanor said, and it was true. She felt cherished, protected, loved in a way that was both passionate and profoundly safe. "Thank you for being so patient with me." "Always," Ryder promised. "In this and everything else, we are partners, Eleanor, equals, and I will never treat you otherwise." Eleanor drifted off to sleep, feeling more content than she had thought possible, secure in the knowledge that she had found a man who understood what gentle meant. The following months passed in a haze of happiness. Eleanor continued working at Martha's shop several days a week, enjoying the work and the companionship of the other women. The rest of the time she spent at the ranch, working alongside Ryder to maintain their home and property. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning each other's habits and preferences, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Eleanor learned to handle cattle, to mend fences, to read the weather signs Ryder pointed out. Ryder learned to appreciate a well-organized home, to recognize when Eleanor needed quiet time alone, to navigate the occasional moments when old fears surfaced and she pulled back into herself. They talked through conflicts rather than letting resentment build, and they made sure to express appreciation for each other daily. In the fall, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had been afraid to hope. When she finally told Ryder, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. They spent that evening making plans, discussing names and nursery arrangements, and all the ways they would make sure their child grew up knowing they were loved and safe. "No child of mine will ever fear coming home," Ryder said fiercely, his hand resting on Eleanor's still flat stomach. "No child of mine will ever wonder if they are wanted or valued. We will build something different, something better." "We will," Eleanor agreed, covering his hand with hers. "We already have." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Eleanor had bouts of morning sickness and exhaustion. Ryder was attentive without being overbearing, taking over more of the household tasks and insisting Eleanor rest when she needed to. Martha and Sarah were constant sources of support and advice, and Eleanor felt surrounded by a community of women who genuinely cared about her well-being. In late April of 1879, Eleanor went into labor. It was long and difficult, but Ryder stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand and offering encouragement. When their son finally entered the world with a loud, healthy cry, Eleanor and Ryder wept together with joy and relief. They named him Thomas after the preacher who had married them, with the middle name of Michael after Ryder's mother. Thomas Xander was a beautiful baby, with his father's brown hair and his mother's gray eyes. From the moment Ryder held his son, Eleanor could see the fierce love and protectiveness in his expression. He was tender with the baby in a way that made Eleanor's heart overflow. "He is perfect," Ryder whispered, carefully cradling the infant against his chest. "Absolutely perfect." "He is," Eleanor agreed, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. The early months of parenthood were challenging. Thomas was colicky and did not sleep well, leaving both Eleanor and Ryder exhausted. But they worked as a team, taking turns walking the baby at night, supporting each other through the difficult moments, and celebrating the small victories together. Ryder proved to be a devoted father, completely comfortable with the practical aspects of infant care and utterly besotted with his son. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Eleanor marveled at the difference between her childhood and her son's. Thomas was surrounded by love and gentleness. When he cried, someone always came to comfort him. When he made mistakes, he was guided patiently rather than punished harshly. He was encouraged to explore and learn, to express his feelings, to develop his own personality. Eleanor and Ryder were united in their determination to raise him differently from how they had been raised. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Eleanor gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Violet. The twins were easier babies than Thomas had been, though managing 3 children under 3 was exhausting. Once again, Ryder proved himself to be an equal partner in parenting, never suggesting that child care was solely Eleanor's responsibility. They hired help on the ranch to free up more of Ryder's time, and Eleanor reduced her hours at Martha's shop to focus on the children. Life was full and busy and chaotic, but it was good. The ranch prospered, the children thrived, and Eleanor and Ryder's love deepened with each passing year. They still made time for each other, still had their evening talks on the porch after the children were asleep, still prioritized their relationship amid the demands of parenthood and ranch life. One evening, when Thomas was 5 and the twins were 3, Eleanor sat on the porch watching Ryder teach Thomas how to ride. The boy sat proudly on a gentle old mare, his father walking beside him with a hand on his leg, offering quiet encouragement. The twins played nearby, building elaborate structures from sticks and rocks. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sarah came up the porch steps, her second child, a daughter named Emma, balanced on her hip. "You look thoughtful," she said, settling into the chair beside Eleanor. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in the past 7 years. When I arrived in Pendleton, I was running from everything I had ever known. I had no idea what kind of life I was running toward. And now, look at this." Eleanor gestured to the scene before them. "I have a home, a family, a community. I have more happiness than I ever thought possible." "You deserve it," Sarah said warmly. "You and Ryder both. You have built something beautiful together." "He showed me what gentle meant," Eleanor said softly. "I had never known a gentle touch until I met him, and now our children will grow up knowing nothing but gentleness and love. That feels like a miracle." "It is not a miracle. It is the result of conscious choice, hard work, and genuine love. You and Ryder chose to break the cycles you grew up in. You chose to build something better. That takes courage and commitment." Eleanor nodded, watching as Ryder lifted Thomas down from the horse and ruffled his hair affectionately. The boy beamed up at his father with complete trust and adoration. That trust, that easy affection, was something Eleanor had never experienced as a child. Seeing it in her own children filled her with profound gratitude. Ryder looked up and caught her eye, smiling that familiar smile that still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to Thomas, then headed toward the porch. As he approached, Eleanor stood to meet him, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "How lucky I am. How much I love you." "I am the lucky one," Ryder said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You took a chance on a rough cowboy with more calluses than sense. You took a chance on a terrified woman with more trauma than trust." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "We saved each other, Ryder." "We did," he agreed, then kissed her properly. The kind of kiss that still sent warmth flooding through her entire body, even after years of marriage. "Papa!" The twins came running up, demanding his attention, and Ryder scooped them both up with practiced ease. Thomas followed more slowly, already developing his father's quiet competence. Eleanor watched her family with a full heart, thinking about how far she had come from that terrified young woman stepping off the stagecoach. She had come to Pendleton expecting nothing more than survival. Instead, she had found love, partnership, community, and purpose. She had learned that not all men were cruel, that touch could be tender rather than brutal, that she was worthy of kindness and respect. Ryder had shown her what gentle meant, and together they had built a life defined by love rather than fear. As the years continued to pass, the Xander family became a fixture in Pendleton. Ryder's reputation as a fair and honest rancher grew, and the Double Cross spread expanded to become one of the most successful operations in the region. Eleanor continued working part-time at Martha's shop, eventually becoming a full partner in the business. Their children grew strong and confident, secure in their parents' love and the stability of their home. Thomas developed his father's love of ranching and his mother's thoughtful nature. By the time he was 12, he was riding out with Ryder regularly, learning the business from the ground up. The twins were inseparable and bright as new pennies, with Rose showing an aptitude for numbers that led to her managing the ranch's books by age 15, and Violet inheriting her mother's skill with needle and thread, eventually taking over much of the design work at the dress shop. In 1889, when Eleanor was 35 and Ryder was 38, they welcomed their fourth child, a son named Daniel. His birth was easier than Eleanor's previous pregnancies, and he was a peaceful baby who seemed to bring a special tranquility to the household. By then, Thomas was 10 and the twins were 8, old enough to be genuinely helpful with their younger brother. Eleanor sometimes thought about what her life might have been if Ryder had not intervened that first day in Pendleton. If she had married Crawley, she likely would have ended up dead or broken beyond repair. Instead, she had been given the gift of time, safety, and love. She had been allowed to heal, to grow, to discover who she was beyond the fear and trauma of her past. Crawley had left Pendleton not long after the confrontation, run out of town after one too many drunken brawls. Eleanor had heard he died somewhere in California, though she felt no satisfaction in the news, only a distant sadness for a life wasted in bitterness and cruelty. Her brother Marcus had written once, demanding to know where she was and insisting she owed him money for her upkeep all those years. Ryder had responded with a brief, firm letter explaining that Eleanor owed her family nothing and would not be contacted again. They never heard from Marcus after that, which suited Eleanor perfectly. Some connections were better severed completely. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ryder took Eleanor on a trip to Portland, their first extended time away from the ranch and children. Sarah and James took over childcare duties, and Eleanor and Ryder spent a week staying in a nice hotel, seeing plays, shopping, and simply enjoying each other's company without the demands of daily ranch life. One evening, as they walked along the Willamette River, Ryder took Eleanor's hand. "Do you ever regret how we started, the circumstances that brought you here?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I regret what I suffered before I met you. I regret that I had to run to find safety. But I do not regret any of what came after. If all of that pain was necessary to bring me to you, to this life we have built, then I would endure it again." "You should not have had to endure it at all," Ryder said quietly. "But I understand what you mean, and I am grateful every day that I was in town that afternoon, that I saw what was happening and had the chance to intervene. Meeting you, loving you, building this life together, it is the best thing that has ever happened to me." They stopped walking, and Eleanor turned to face her husband. He was older now, with silver threading through his brown hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but to her he was as handsome as the day they met. More importantly, he was still the gentlest, kindest man she had ever known. "I love you, Ryder Xander, more than I have words to express." "I love you too, Eleanor. Always have, always will." They kissed there by the river, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. When they returned to the ranch, their children greeted them with enthusiastic hugs and stories about all the adventures they had had with their aunt and uncle. The house was messy but intact, and Eleanor felt her heart swell with affection for their chaotic, loving family. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. There were droughts that tested the cattle herds, harsh winters that strained resources, the usual illnesses and accidents that came with frontier living. But Eleanor and Ryder faced everything together, their partnership stronger for having weathered storms. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet-natured young woman named Catherine, who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the northern section of the ranch property and began raising their own family, giving Eleanor and Ryder their first grandchildren. The twins both married within a year of each other, rose to a schoolteacher named Henry and Violet to a young carpenter named Samuel. Daniel, the youngest, showed signs of wanting to study law, and Ryder and Eleanor supported his ambitions, proud of all their children for becoming thoughtful, compassionate adults. By 1905, Eleanor was 51 and Ryder was 54. They had 8 grandchildren and another on the way. The ranch was thriving under Thomas's increasingly skilled management, though Ryder still spent his days riding the property and checking on the cattle. Eleanor had fully retired from the dress shop, though she still did alterations and special projects for old friends. One warm summer evening, Eleanor and Ryder sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times over the past 27 years. Their hands were clasped together, fingers interlaced in the comfortable familiarity of long marriage. "Do you remember the first time we sat out here together?" Eleanor asked. "When you told me I could learn to live in a world where kindness did not come with a price?" "I remember. You looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language." "I was so afraid," Eleanor admitted. "Afraid to hope, afraid to trust, afraid to believe that things could be different. And now I know you were right. I learned to live in that world because you showed me how. You were patient when I needed patience, gentle when I needed gentleness, strong when I needed strength. You gave me the space to heal and the support to grow. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself." Ryder brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You did the same for me, you know. I was so closed off after Emily, convinced that I was not cut out for marriage and family. Then you arrived, all fear and fierce determination, and showed me what real partnership looked like. You taught me that love could be gentle on both sides, that strength and tenderness were not opposites but complements." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky fade from gold to purple to deep blue. Somewhere in the distance, one of their grandchildren laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch, their home, was filled with the echoes of family and love and the life they had built together. "I am glad you were in town that day," Eleanor said softly. "I am glad you saw what was happening and cared enough to intervene. You saved my life, Ryder, not just from Crawley, but from the belief that I did not deserve better. You showed me what gentle meant, and it changed everything." "We saved each other," Ryder corrected, pulling her closer. "And we built this together. This family, this home, this life. It belongs to both of us." Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the familiar warmth of his embrace. She thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, broken and desperate and certain that survival was the best she could hope for. She thought about the patient cowboy who had seen past her fear to the strength beneath, who had offered kindness without strings and love without conditions. They had built something extraordinary together. They had broken the cycles of violence and fear they had grown up with and created a legacy of gentleness and love for their children and grandchildren. The mail-order bride who had never known a gentle touch had learned not just to accept gentleness, but to embody it, to pass it on to the next generation. As the stars began to appear overhead, Eleanor and Ryder remained on their porch, content in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. Their story had started with desperation and intervention, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to the transforming power of genuine kindness, patient love, and the choice to be gentle in a world that often rewarded cruelty. The Double Cross Ranch would continue to thrive for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each one carrying the values Eleanor and Ryder had worked so hard to instill. The story of how the Xander family began with a terrified woman and a compassionate cowboy would become family legend, told and retold to remind future generations that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that gentleness was strength rather than weakness, and that the choices we make today shape the world we leave for tomorrow. Eleanor Jenkins, Xander had come to Oregon expecting nothing more than survival. Instead, she had found everything she never knew she needed: a home, a partner, a family, and the revolutionary discovery that she was worthy of gentle love. And Ryder Xander, the cowboy who had shown her what gentle meant, spent every day of their marriage proving that the greatest strength a man could possess was the ability to wield his power with tenderness and respect. Together, they had built not just a life, but a legacy, one that would endure long after they were gone. And on warm summer evenings, when the grandchildren gathered on the porch of the old ranch house, someone would always tell the story of how it all began, with a stagecoach arrival, a timely intervention, and the beginning of a love that had changed everything. Years later, when Eleanor was 70 and Ryder was 73, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The celebration was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and music drifting across the property. Eleanor watched as Ryder danced with their great-granddaughter, his movements slower, but his smile just as warm. She felt the weight of their 50 years together, the accumulated joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, all of it woven together into the rich tapestry of their shared life. Their eldest grandson, Thomas's boy, Jacob, who was now running the ranch, approached and offered Eleanor his arm. "Grandmother, will you dance with me?" "I would be delighted," Eleanor said, allowing him to lead her onto the makeshift dance floor. As they moved to the music, Jacob spoke softly. "Grandfather told me the story today, about how you met, about how he intervened when that man tried to force you into marriage." "Did he?" Eleanor smiled. "That was a long time ago. He said it was the most important thing he ever did, stopping to help you that day. He said it gave him everything that mattered." Jacob paused, then continued. "I want you to know that the way you and Grandfather have loved each other, the way you have raised your family, it has set a standard for all of us. My Catherine and I, we try to build the same kind of partnership you two have, where both people are respected, where love is gentle and strong at the same time." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. This was the legacy she and Ryder had worked to create, not just financial security or property to pass down, but values and examples that would shape how their descendants approach love and family. "That makes me happier than you can know," she said. "Your grandfather and I, we both came from such darkness. We were determined that our children would know something different, something better. To hear that you are carrying that forward with your own family, that is everything we could have hoped for." The song ended, and Jacob escorted Eleanor back to her seat. Ryder joined her a moment later, slightly out of breath, but grinning. "Still got it," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "You certainly do," Eleanor agreed, taking his hand. His fingers, gnarled now with arthritis but still strong, closed around hers with familiar warmth. They sat together watching their family celebrate. 3 generations of Xanders gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. As the sun set behind the mountains, the same mountains Eleanor had first seen 27 years ago when arriving in Pendleton, she reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been a mail-order bride who never made it to her wedding, saved by a cowboy who believed in showing rather than telling what gentle meant. From that desperate beginning had grown a love story that spanned decades, a family that numbered in the dozens, and a ranch that stood as testament to what could be built when 2 people chose kindness over cruelty, partnership over control, and gentle love over harsh domination. Eleanor leaned her head on Ryder's shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. "Thank you," she whispered. For what? For everything, for seeing me that day in town, for caring enough to intervene, for showing me what my life could be, for loving me so well." Ryder pressed a kiss to the top of her head, his lips gentle against her silver hair. "The privilege has been mine, Eleanor. Every single day, the privilege has been mine." As the celebration continued around them, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Eleanor and Ryder sat together in the peaceful contentment of two people who had built something lasting and true. Their story was not one of easy perfection or romance without struggle. It was something better, a story of healing and growth, of conscious choice and hard-won trust, of learning what gentle meant and committing to living that gentleness every single day. The mail-order bride had never known a gentle touch until the cowboy showed her what gentle meant. And in doing so, he had not just saved her life, but had helped her discover that she was worthy of love, respect, and kindness. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure through generations, proof that even from the darkest beginnings could grow the most beautiful things. And as the moon rose over the Double Cross Ranch, casting silver light across the land, Eleanor and Ryder had nurtured for more than half a century. Their hands remained clasped together, strong, gentle, and enduring, just like the love that had sustained them through all the years of their remarkable life together.